Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to look at the next part of Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40k, Episode 5, The Imperium Strikes. Last time around, goddamn, a fan with too much time. The person behind this series did a masterful job of showing exactly why monsters in the dark are terrifying. Because the one moment where they were visible, it was less terrifying. But when you just see them picking off the team, and you don't have it told to them, and it's given through the perspective of a character who's not sure what's going on, but they can see enough information that you can pull that inference as a reader. That's well done. And most people don't think to do that. They'll give you all the information. What we're getting here is all the information, but told to us incorrectly that we have to then parse to understand. But it's not difficult because we know the situation and the character is specifically shown to be in such a state that they can't parse it. So we are, and it's that extra little bit of legwork that is usually either done horribly to the point where you don't actually tell the information you think you do, or more often they just tell you this is what happened. And while that's usually just fine, it's just fine. This is going a step beyond and doing great. And I really want to get back into this. I got a little more time, so I can finally, and we're going to do it. Otherwise, if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And when you're done, because I have to add this to all my videos now, apparently, I am not on TikTok. There is someone impersonating me on TikTok. And honestly, getting 100,000 more views than I am, which is moderately annoying. But yes, that's not me. I do not have a TikTok. I have a Twitter, @Airier Games. I have YouTube, here, where you're at right now. And I also have Discord, which is linked below. No TikTok. That is not a thing. Yeah. Also, I have a Twitch, but I literally never use it. I don't think I'm going to start doing that. Yeah. Otherwise, you know the deal. Link below. Hit it up. And let's get started.
The fall had been hard, had half-winded her, but Sheena forced herself up.
We're still in Sheena's
She looked around. They were in the prep room right before the escape pods. The walls were lined with shelves of specialized emergency equipment and supplies to supplement the basic stores already in the pods.
Escape pod, okay.
She ignored these.
Different art. I don't know what game this is
from.
from.
Turning to Dr. Tarani and grabbing the weeping woman by her shoulders. "Come on, Tarani. Up now. We have to get going."
Not everyone's dead yet.
Sheena said as she tried to pull her colleague to her feet. But Dr. Tarani was limp, uncooperative, inconsolable. And when Dr. Sheena heard the muffled sound of lightsaber strikes just outside the door, she gave her only one more hard tug before releasing the doctor and leaving her on the floor. The hallway was straight and narrow, terminating in an airlock door which led...
Now that is a hard scene to write, because normally you're doing a scene right now where you're showing something breaking down. And the main character, at least in this view, Sheena, has had her breakdown, but she's still there enough to know bad sounds behind you, run. She's not putting together all the pieces, which I talked about earlier. But here we're showing the other extreme where there's that person who made it through, but I'm assuming because they were not concussed, most likely, they put the pieces together and had a mental breakdown and they just gave up the sheer, well, terror. In 40k, they would call that usually transhuman terror, which in more reasonable terms, it's a mix of just that uncanny valley where Space Marines are just slightly off from human, just slightly enough that it looks really weird. Like when you see someone who had cancer take out part of their jaw and you look at them and then they're fine, but the part that was cancer is removed and you're just like, there's that moment of initial, oh God, because it's actually a survival mechanism that is evolved into the brain to identify things not normal as potentially dangerous. You then can overcome it because you know the person's fine when you figure out what's going on, but you have that instinctive response. Here, we're seeing a bit of that lizard brain kick in, although considering all the various species, it might literally be a lizard brain for all we know. Also, the term lizard brain is not actually scientific, but it gets the idea of a cross of primitive responses. It would never have actually been a thing for mammals, though.
To the rows of escape pods. She got up unsteadily and made for the door at a full sprint. Something the
they're not in the escape pod, they're escape pod loading bay.
The ship rocked, knocking her off balance and sending her painfully to the floor. She fell badly this time, slamming her knee and shin against one of the protruding shelves of equipment. As she pulled herself up to her feet, the lights around her flickered, but steadied after a moment.
We're going to get the reveal.
The scientist hissed as she discovered she could no longer put much weight on her injured leg, but saw she did not have much distance to travel. Wincing, finding...
This moment right here, this is such a moment of absolute terror. And I love it because they're establishing the one thing Star Wars rarely does well, but when it does, it's goddamn amazing. This is Rogue One, Darth Vader in the corridor. This is that scene right now where there's the implacable monster behind them and they can't do anything but run, and even that is restricted. And The escape levels here are awesome. I love this. This is well done, especially because her falling gives you more immediacy. It's not just, I got to the door. It's, I ran. I tried to get my colleague. I failed. I fell. There is physical pain. I am limping and it's so close. It's within my reach, which is why there is no way we are not getting a reveal. Not just in the dark shadows. We saw them slaying clones, which we kind of got a reveal before, but it was heavily toned down even in the image. We're going to get the reveal now because it's built up masterfully.
That something in her equipment was prodding painfully against her bruised waist, and leaning against the wall, she began to hobble her way forward until she noticed that Dr. Tarani had stopped crying.
Turn around.
Tarani, get over here and help me get to the door panel.
No.
She said as she turned to look back at the other doctor.
No.
When she did look back, she found the door to the corridor was open, and where Dr. Tarani had been, only a smear of gore remained.
Which also means the Jedi's
Dr.
dead.
Sheena snapped her eyes away quickly, hobbling closer to the door, wincing again as she felt something hard prod against her and the wall. Her data pad? Then she felt something else. In the wall. In the floor.
What?
It chilled her blood yet again, drove her fear into such a frenzy it was all she could do not
they
to allow
were
the
already in
darkness
here. They
gnawing at
already
the
cleared
corners
this.
of her
That's dead
vision to
bodies.
devour her. The feeling was vibrations.
Oh?
Footfalls. She remembered then, in a sudden fit of desperate energy, that she still had the blaster pistol
That's
on
not
her,
going to help at
and
this
without
range.
thinking, without
Maybe at this range,
planning,
actually.
drew it from where it had been prodding her waist. She spun on her good leg, ignoring the surges of agony which her injured leg protested with, and fired. Her unexpected shot flew through the air, clean and level despite her lack of training and current conditions.
Beginner's luck, hell.
It scorched the air of the hallway, sped through the door,
And then
leading
did
out,
nothing?
and hissed against the wall. There was nothing there. Nothing behind her.
Oh.
The doctor held herself rigid, panting, sweating as she watched for movement, any movement. But as the 10th second slid by, there was still nothing. Just the creaking of the ship and the distant rumbles of weapons fire.
God, I thought they had the reveal.
Swallowing the lump which had formed
Still feels
in her
like a build
throat,
up to it.
Dr. Sheena turned back toward the door, pistol still in hand, making her way to the panel. She felt something again, another rumbling in the wall, more vibrations behind her. She didn't turn this time, hobbling the last few steps to the control panel, feeling her skin crawl with each mechanical thump which...
See, I was assuming at first she was going to die here at the reveal, but if they're just pulling it back and giving a fake out, that would give impressions, at least to me, that she's going to get to the escape pod and then the reveal hit. Well, I was going to say it would hit, but that's probably in bad taste considering that would literally kill her at this point. But then it's going to happen when she actually has a plausible way of escaping. But it's building so much tension. If there's not a reveal, I'm actually going to say that's a mistake.
Rang through the wall she leaned on and the floor she stood on. Finally, the Syrian scientist fell against the panel and twisted painfully onto her back, gun out. Her pistol was trembling so hard in her hands that she doubted her aim would be able to hit any kind of mark this time, but that was beyond her concern, because there was no mark. The hallway, the prep
Still
room,
empty.
the doorway, it was all still empty.
I mean, unless there's an assassin, this
She
is weird.
swallowed again and tasted bile there. Was she completely mad?
Well, probably, but also...
Had she already lost her mind? Slowly, gingerly, she turned back towards the control panel, gripping its sides tightly as the ship creaked around her, almost as if in response to her own movements. She knew she didn't have her code cylinders on her, but the console before her was undamaged, so she resorted to her access code.
That's surprising.
Dr. Sheena began dialing it in, feeling the hairs rise on the back of her neck as she did.
Were they just waiting for an access
Something
code?
was wrong about all of this. Where were they? What happened to the Jedi? Why was Dr. Tarani a red smear, and yet Sheena herself was still alive?
That is a very good thing, and I was kind of thinking maybe they're highlighting that it's just horror, but now I'm going with this is actually highlighting a different aspect. What he's doing right now is lampshading the fact that it's weird she's alive and hasn't seen anyone. Because a Jedi against an individual Space Marine, honestly, I would put my money on the Jedi if they're prepared. Taken unaware, we've seen how well that goes. But the fact that that's stopped, the people he was defending are smeared and she's still alive, would normally indicate she should be dead right now as well. The only thing I can think is it's not a case of a Space Marine, it's going to be one of the assassins? That's the only thing I can possibly imagine at this point. Just because this is a very stealthy, engaging approach of trying to get information from someone, seeing what buttons they press. That's the only thing I can imagine, because I think they mentioned everything else was destroyed around it. People were literally unpeoplized. That's the only thing I can think. But he's highlighting it well.
And then a cold, black thought struck through her.
Trap?
Slid into her mind like an assassin's knife. Her fingers hovered above the last key, not having pressed it yet, a bead of sweat and blood dripping from the digit onto the control panel. She released the blaster pistol, her grip failing her, allowing it to fall to the ground with a clatter. Hands numb, she drew out her datapad instead, and with trembling fingers, she opened up the translation matrix which she had downloaded earlier, ready for input. The datapad chimed. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as much as possible, given that she was almost certain that, despite present appearances,
being watched.
She was already as good as dead.
Yeah, probably.
She tried to speak but coughed and had to start again. What are you? What do you want? She asked into the air. The datapad chimed again, and then, using her own voice, it repeated the sentence in the outsider language. She listened, holding her breath, her ears working like they had never worked before. And it, whatever it was, answered. Its voice was deep, mechanical, but not born of a machine. There was too much emotion there, too much power for this to be a droid. Translating. When it spoke a moment later, it did so as it had with her, and used the outsider's own voice to speak the translation.
Ooh.
I am an angel of death.
I think it's I'm an angel of death, but honestly, it's really hard to understand. I'm going to put the subtitles on. Oh, never mind. There are none. Not even the automatic ones. I think it said I am an angel of death, but I could be very wrong there. Odd that it's coming through so modulated. I thought they had different... maybe it's an intentional choice to make it sound like that way. Kind of surprised that they're going stealth on this. I didn't think there was any Raven Guard. No surprise about that. Maybe I'm mistaken. It could very well be. I know there was a lot of different chapters involved, not just the Crusade various ones, specifically the Templars and the Black... Why do I want to say Black Knights? Because I've been playing Battletech, that's why. The Black Templars and the Ultramarine shoot-off. Don't mean offshoot either, I mean shoot-off.
And I have come to render judgment.
Oh, that's not what I was
At the
expecting.
enunciation of its last word, the ship's power finally failed, everything becoming black for a few heart-rending seconds before the emergency lighting kicked in. Red stripes of hazy light overlaid everything, dyeing the room in a crimson sheen outlined in long black shadows. Slowly, deliberately, she turned around. She needed to see it, and when she did, her breath was pulled.
Oh, it's missing an arm.
Her eyes grew wide, but not wide enough to encompass the monstrous form of the Angel of Death.
Yeah.
It stood over 2 meters tall and was as broad as a fully grown...
Oh, so... Oh, that's interesting. If this ever holds true, usually when you have the skull iconography, that's standard for Captain. God damn, that's actually surprising. I can't quite make it out, but I think this is the consoles. I don't remember their quite name, but I'm pretty sure this is the Ultramarine shootout, which is weird because I didn't think they were stealthy at all.
Herglik. It almost resembled an archaic depiction of a Knight of Zel, or other such ancient warriors who donned armor and swords to set upon their enemies.
They're
But
really
the
pushing for that Zel
comparison
thing.
didn't do the thing justice. It was more like those ancient men had somehow looked upon this thing and had tried in vain to imitate the wonder of it, the terror of it.
You know, that actually makes a lot of sense because in the previous video's comments, people were talking about how there was this religious order of human supremacists way back in history for this entire thing. The only thing is, I was going to say timetables wouldn't match up, but then I realized it's two different universes. You just say time doesn't match and it makes sense. And considering how long 40K has been around for, at least with Space Marines as a constant, having an imitation of it very well might happen. So it would imply that there has been crossover between these universes, at least within this entire framework. Interesting. Also, considering how clean it is, yeah, the Jedi took his arm off, but I'm assuming, where's the other arm? I mean, he still has legs,
The doctor
but...
found herself so overtaken by the innate power emanating from
both
this
arms?
thing
Damn.
that it took her several seconds to realize that it was wounded. One of its arms, its right arm, was missing below the elbow. Looking at the opposite side for comparison, she found that its other intact hand was holding something small and bloody, something which still dripped with ichor.
Jedi said?
She let her eyes wander back to the softly glowing lenses of its head. It was looking down directly at her, and the attention alone felt lethal, as if it could smash her flat with just its eyes.
Probably could.
She wondered
Headbutting.
briefly why she was even still alive.
That is a question.
And then she remembered. It had been watching her type in her code,
Yep.
memorizing her security password.
Yep.
She looked down at its boot, the blue armor there more than just lit in red, but covered in it.
And that is one of the
Swallowing,
Ultramarines.
she turned back around, looking down at the console. It hadn't shut off, still glowing a soft blue in the hazy light. It was still waiting for her last key. Dr. Sheena breathed in, feeling her mind frenzy behind her eyes.
Yeah, this is where she dies, unless something
turning
happens.
inside out in an attempt to save her. She breathed out and pressed the key. The console screen turned green and the airlock opened. At the same moment, a bright yellow beam of light sprang forth, humming in the air less than an inch from Sheena's own face.
Oh!
It was holding Renfi's lightsaber in its dripping fist. She knew what came next. The blade pulled away as the being, the angel, reeled back its arm. Sheena felt her lips twitch as she turned around one last time. Her heart was hammering, but her mind was oddly calm. It held the sword of light out like a proper executioner.
God damn. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed Renfi died, but I'm not surprised at all. They built him up well, but god damn. Granted, if there's one thing you should know in fiction, if you don't see the body, not dead. You see the lightsaber, usually for a Jedi, that's as good as dead, or being written out of the story. I really doubt he's alive, but he could be just Darth Mauled. Very, very close to dead, missing most limbs, but apparently that's survivable.
It would end her cleanly and at once.
If he does it right.
She watched it, and it watched her. Hands at her sides, chin tilted up, eyes open. It gave Sheena the slightest hint of a nod, and swung. She didn't have time to close her eyes, even to blink. So she watched as the yellow blade flashed through the air, watched as the ventilation shaft to her right suddenly burst open, a bright blue saber flying out from it, as Gaffin spun like a rotary blade through the air. He collided with and caught his master's yellow sword on his own beam of azure light. His face was fierce, full of fear and rage, full of conviction and purpose.
Damn.
Even as Dr. Sheena began to stumble back, Gaffin turned to her, eyes...
Oh, for a second I thought this was his original art for the story, but then I realized, no, one, the sword, of course, but that's a Dark Angel, and I'm pretty sure they didn't bring any of those. But it does look like it's a Jedi versus a Dark Angel, and it looks like a Sith because of all the black. Actually, it's kind of funny. I have no idea where this came from, but it's fun.
Meeting hers for less than a second as his free hand thrust forward in her direction. At the gesture, a force, like a wind, but stronger, more shaped, more precise, more focused, picked her up and threw her into the room beyond. Inside, row after row of escape pods sat.
Get in, get
awaiting
out.
use, and she landed almost inside of one, crying
Damn,
out as
good
she
aim.
fell against the bad side of her leg. She grabbed the handle near the door of the nearest pod and hauled herself up and over the lip, looking back to see Gaffin the Padawan doing his best to hold the monster in the hallway. He was much smaller than the angel
And there's
of
no way
death,
he's going to win this.
and was combining that with
Maybe
his agility
escape,
to
but-
bolster his advantage. But already she could see it wouldn't be enough. watching as the inhuman thing Gavin contended with weaved and moved, blocking his strikes and nearly landing several of its own.
I mean, Gavin has a massive advantage in the Force. On the other hand, he physically can't move as fast as a Space Marine unless he's empowering himself. And if he wasn't a Padawan, I think maybe that would be a possibility. It's just very less likely unless plot happens. Yeah, he's about to die. Honestly, I was expecting Renfi maybe to live, but I wasn't very certain of it. I was really expecting Gavin, or Gafton, how do you say his name, to live. That's kind of surprised he's dead.
The pace of it was making Dr. Sheena disbelieve her own eyes.
It's also showing her why she shouldn't hate Jedi.
How could something so large and so heavily armored move like that? It defied all the laws and rules her mind had become so apt at mastering, and
Big
the sight
muscles.
of that armored thing
Also not entirely
rolling
human.
and spinning and ducking and striking with all the fluidity and grace of a waving
Possibly
flame
somewhat of a
plunged her
psychic
into
monstrosity
an
in its own right.
inexplainable but all
We don't
too
talk about that.
powerful terror. With great effort, she tore her eyes away and crawled into the hatch, kicking the ceiling trigger with her good leg and watching the door slam shut. Sweating, tasting blood she knew wasn't her own, the doctor pulled herself up into
Some
a
of it
seat
might very well
and
be, though.
punched the launch button. The seals which held the pod in the bay burst, and she was jettisoned from the metal meat grinder that the Honor Hound had become.
Oh yeah, I forgot
Dr.
that's the
Sheena
name of it.
huddled near the window, watching, but could not see the end of the fight. Still, she hoped to see another escape pod leaving after hers. She hoped to get some sign that she had been wrong,
No.
that she was not the only surviving member of the crew, the only person to escape that slaughter. What she saw instead was the wreckage of the fleet which surrounded her. No other escape pods detached from the smoldering, limping remains of the Honor Hound.
God damn. I love this for two reasons. One, it does highlight her internal bias against Jedi and showing two of them having died for her. One, that she suspected and then had confirmation of the lightsaber. And two, the one she had been visibly angry at and had the only interaction with being the one who basically sacrificed themselves to the best of her knowledge for her. That is... It's a good bit of character growth right here because she might still hold those prejudices, but this is definitely a moment to start rethinking them. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to be very surprised because honestly, she survived. And I was surprised about that in general. I thought everyone was kind of dead after the last episode. And then we went back here. It's like, oh, now we get to see how they died. No, we're getting to see how the one survivor that she knows about gets out. Still thinking he might be alive just because the Gavin, if you don't see how it ends, you don't trust it's dead. Renfi, pretty sure, but not going to be surprised if he comes back. Gavin, very much expecting him to be taken as a prisoner.
And all around her, massive, godlike ships were firing weapons larger than Star Destroyers, mopping up the scattered remnants of the fleet. Starfighters and smaller craft still darted about.
Oh, that's another
fighting for
ship
their
in the back.
lives as they were hunted down by swarms
Dude.
of tens of thousands of what passed for strike craft among
This
these
is awesome.
new invaders. The doctor felt her pod jerk suddenly, recognizing the loss of momentum that came with being seized by a tractor beam.
Oh,
She pressed
don't think
her
the Imperials
forehead
have tractor
against the
beams.
cool window, feeling her leg throb painfully, feeling her head ache, feeling the blood of the clones, the blood of perhaps even Dr. Hackneyan, drying onto her skin and clothes. There was nothing more she could do.
Okay, so someone pointed out, just on sheer scale, one, this is so freaking cool. Sorry, I love space battles in general, like anything to do with giant spaceships. And yes, they're at knife fighting distance, which honestly, from what I've heard and seen so far demonstrating the story, is better for the Star Wars side because their weapons can actually be effective, as opposed to the 40K side, which is apparently outranging them en masse. Granted, slower in maneuverability, faster in overall acceleration, which does make sense because brute power is kind of a thing for the Imperium. Also, they don't really need to turn because they just warp to where they need to go and then just generally have so long it doesn't really matter because their movement arcs are more just get there, not we're going to be close enough to we're going left or right. It's going to actually matter. You don't really need to turn when you're so far away. Going straight is perfectly fine, and taking a day to turn is still probably within a week of when you need it. Sometimes they're just depicted that way, other times they're not. It really depends on the author writing the various space aspects. It does change. Some do it by the minute, others do it by the week. I personally favor week. I don't know which one fans going on. It seems like they're going really damn fast, though. Also, these were the size of the ships equivalent to Star Destroyers. So when she says larger than a Star Destroyer, she means any of these main guns, which are basically the size of these little, well, destroyers. So functionally, a Star Destroyer and an Imperial Destroyer are actually roughly equivalent. It's just that's not how the Star Wars side ever thought about it. But Destroyer technically is an accurate title. Just not how they wanted before. Before it was a fun title to make them afraid. Now it's an accurate representation of tonnage by comparison.
No more places she could run to as her pod was pulled in. The ship which was pulling her in had not stopped its own movement, and that much was evident in how long it was taking to pull her in. Dr. Sheena bit her lip as she was drawn further and further from the battle. She wanted to hope that she was being rescued, but the logic of that didn't sit well within her. Why wasn't the enemy pursuing? Why would an escaping ship even bother with her?
That makes sense, but honestly, I didn't think the Imperials had Star Destroyers. That is something I didn't think that you had access to. Also, I have no idea what ship that is. I was going to say it's or the Star Wars side, but I don't recognize the two towers. That looks like an Star Destroyer, but it's slightly different than I was expecting.
Soon, she found the ship she was being pulled into was mostly unpowered.
What?
Red emergency lights bathing the small hangar. She felt the last dredges of her adrenaline course through her as shapes approached the pod
I have no idea
from
what
the
this is.
darkness. But she stayed put. The armored hands that opened the pod were the hands of clones, and they quickly entered and ferried her out, carefully setting her down on a crate within the dark hangar area. She was stunned, relieved, and deeply confused.
Yeah?
"What's going on?" she asked. A clone which sat beside
Black
her
Ops
gave her
clones?
a painful slap on the shoulder and a laugh. "We're getting out of here, that's what." "But why aren't you already gone?"
Deserter clones? Really? Sorry, as soon as he hear the slap on the arm getting out. Oh my god, it's actually just... I didn't even know they could do that.
She pressed.
Looting.
The clone removed his helmet and scratched his head, smiling with no small amount of chagrin. He offered her a Bacta inhaler as the other clones went into her pod and began to dismantle its rudimentary hyperdrive. Bucket, which was what the clone called itself, explained that they had escaped the battle by shutting down almost everything and acting like a dead ship with burning engines. And apparently, the only reason this had worked
The engines were burning?
was because the ship was extremely close to being exactly that,
Oh, God.
and their navicomputer had been badly damaged. "So you picked me up because you needed my hyperdrive computer?"
Yeah.
The clones
And they
smirked.
probably had none of others, too.
"You're welcome." The clones wasted no time in hooking it up and getting it working, but Dr. Sheena had collapsed flat on the crate and fallen unconscious long before they managed to jump to hyperspace.
Okay, I'm going to make a little nitpicky aspect here. Because you're sticking with the in-person deductions here, we're getting everything filtered through Sheena's perception. I don't like it when you pull back to see things that happen when they're not conscious to see them. Because it's that small little dip from third person attached, which is what we're getting here. We're getting her internal, but we're being told her internal by the narrator. And then just taking that little bit of a twist to say, and now she's unconscious, so we're just going to tell you what's happening before we end the scene. It's not horrible. It's not done badly. I just don't like it because it's breaking the style of narration detail. Again, this is a nitpicky English major thing. So I'm going to do this sometimes. But right now, it's just, you don't need to say they did that work. You just need to say she went unconscious. And that's where you end it because she doesn't have the perception to filter the story through anymore. The reason that's important is because we're getting very much incorrect information. We're getting her perception, what she thinks about what's going on. It's why we don't know what happened with the battle on the ship. We don't know who else survived. She thinks no one else did, but we don't know that. Having incorrect information is very important when you want to build suspense, because if you know exactly what happened from a third-person narrator, you just know what happens. It's why when you go into someone omniscient who can know things outside of the character's, perception, you have to trust it because it's either blatantly lying to you, in which case it doesn't matter, or it's being written down as a story, so it's a third-person narration, but it's from someone else's perspectives who's acting as the narrator. We don't have someone acting as a narrator, so we have a third-person omniscient narrator who's doing things outside of the character's perception, which means everything they say that way has to be taken as truthful, which isn't really an issue if you manage to remember that while you're writing it, and Fan seems pretty damn good at writing, so I would assume this is well done. But it's so easy to fuck up where you put in so much information about how this is what you think is happening, but not actually what's happening, so you could be wrong. But then you do it with a third-person omniscient who should be only telling the truth, because when they start lying, it just kind of breaks the story. It's why lies have to be done through perception. It's either someone intentionally lying to you, which is why narrators are usually given a character relaying a story perspective, or it's the character who is wrong or is intentionally lying to the person getting the information, or it's through their own perceptions, which is what they think is right and they're wrong, or they could be just lying to themselves, which is also very much important. An incorrect narrator is fine when there's a reason. But if you go for omniscient, that doesn't work anymore. Unless God is lying to you, which is essentially the only thing it is there, because you still have to personify it somehow at that point. Again, it's a nitpicky thing, but it's one that does actually stand out.
And the doctor slept and slept. She had no idea for how long, but what she did know was that when she awoke, she was lying within a medical bay, a recently created...
See, this is fine. Not knowing how long she slept is fine. Knowing they completed it, she can assume they did. But again, I just don't like any information delivered outside of perception. It is not a good habit to get in.
Past, constraining her injured leg. She could tell she was on Rothana by the smell.
Really?
Ferrous and fresh, as well as by the model of droid which was tending to her. It had clearly just injected her with something to wake her up, and she could see why right away. The doctor was surrounded by 3 Jedi and a clone. The nurse droid that had been tending to her drifted out of the room, and one of the Jedi approached the right side of her bed. He kneeled down next to her, making it easy for her to watch him without moving her bandaged head. He had a kind but concerned face.
Are we going Obi-Wan?
She did not know
Obi-Wan?
I understand that you've had quite an experience, Dr. Sheep.
It's understated, so I actually believe it.
We hate to follow that up with questions so soon after what happened, but we are finding ourselves facing a little bit of an emergency, and we could use your help.
Yeah, it's definitely Obi-Wan.
Dr. Sheena chuckled at his understatements, and then laughed more loudly. In her mind, the horrors she had seen still reached out at her, grasping at her.
Give it time, they'll probably do it literally.
At them. She mocked them with her laughter, because she had lived. She had survived Hell's touch, and now all it could do was scream at her in her own voice from the confines of her memories.
No, trust me. It's not confined there. It's still trying to kill you. It's just further away.
Impotent, unreal, a failure.
No, the last part's
She
real, but the rest of that isn't.
And laughed, because victory had never tasted so bitter and yet so sweet.
Because she survived.
This seemed to greatly affect the clone and the youngest Jedi, but a raised hand from the one speaking to her was enough to calm them.
Yeah, they think she went insane. Functionally,
out.
probably be nicer for her if she did.
Tell me, Mr. I'm sorry. What was your
Say
name
it.
again? Dr. Sheena
Say it.
asked. Please, call me Obi-Wan.
Called it!
He said. Well, Obi-Wan, do you know anything of the Pius Dia?
This people have told me about. And this is something that was real in actual Star Wars lore. The human-centric, well, cultists, essentially. And that was the end of Episode 5, Imperium Strikes. And goddamn, other than that tiny little break where I'm still harping on it because as an English major, it just... You got a master's in this, you focus on things that just stand out to you. I'm going to nitpick every now and again because it's literally just right in my face. I don't usually have this kind of direct experience when I do videos, but here, this is something directly within my experience level, so I will notice it. That said, it wasn't overdone. It wasn't handled badly. It's just not a good habit to get into because it's easy to slip in and say things that should have been unintentionally wrong where they weren't meant that way, because when you go third person omniscient, it just doesn't quite work. That said, it was only for just a few things which you can then say, well, she just assumed it when she woke up. That wasn't how it was presented, but you can make that argument still, so it's just fine. If this was an edit, it would just be changed to be a second later after she woke up. She assumed they got it good or they got it fixed and then moved on from there. That's the only fix it really needs. But it's not a really big deal. Again, I know I'm nitpicking. That said, every other part about this, the reveal, her realizing and showing that her intelligence, which is very important because when you have a smart character and they do dumb things, that doesn't actually reflect well on the character. But when you have a smart character and they're fucked in the head by probably a little concussion, and then they still make smart, reasoned, and rational decisions, that is brilliant. because most people just can't write smart characters beyond their own experience. Not their own level of intelligence, their own experience of what smart looks like. This is smart because she came to a realization based on incorrect or incomplete data, but was enough to make that inference, and she did it right. And it's good. And all of the little problems are like, why didn't you figure this out sooner? Because she literally had brains splattered on her and is kind of probably concussed. And also in shock from everything else going on. But that's beside the point, because everyone probably was. Renfai, disappointed he died. The Padawan, I'm not believing he's dead yet, just because no body. They specifically outlined she didn't see the end of the fight. Don't believe he's dead. But I want to know more. I want all the information on this. It's so freaking good. So I'm probably just going to go watch it. I can't. I have to go adult. Damn it. But when I do, I'll also have to do a live stream later. Damn it. But after that, I'm going to definitely watch more. So if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. It's a fan with too much time. If you haven't subscribed to them, do that. I've already made sure to fix that on my end because it's really good. And I'll see you guys in the next one. And before I forget, because I have to say this every time now, not on TikTok. Someone impersonating me, not me. And yes, I am annoyed that they average maybe 20 to 30,000 views more than me and sometimes go over 100,000 more than me on a simple 5-second videos where they just take my face and use it on nothing. And I just... Where the person impersonating you is doing a better job at you than you are. Yeah, that's fun. You can find me on Twitter at Airier Games. You can find me here, also at Airier Games, which you would know because you're watching this video. But otherwise, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.